The suitcase. When the ocean refuses to keep secrets. They found her in a suitcase. But that was just the beginning. 18 years. That's how long Clearwater Beach kept its darkest secret buried beneath the sand. 18 years of silence, of unanswered questions, of a mother's endless search. Until one March morning when the tide decided it was time to tell the truth. This is the story of Scarlett Hayes, the girl who vanished into the Florida night, the man who made her disappear, the detective who refused to let her be forgotten, and the confession that changed everything. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story will stay with you long after it ends. Part 1. The Discovery. The March sun stretched across Clearwater Beach, Florida, painting the fine white sand in shades of gold and amber. It was the kind of morning that belonged on a postcard. Gentle waves lapping at the shore, seagulls circling overhead, the salt-tinged breeze carrying the promise of a perfect beach day. But perfection has a way of hiding darkness. Tyler Brennan, a 23-year-old beach maintenance worker, was doing his usual morning sweep when he spotted something unusual half buried in the sand near the water's edge. At first glance, it looked like a piece of driftwood or maybe forgotten luggage from a careless tourist. As he got closer, his stomach tightened. It was a suitcase, but not the kind you'd see at an airport. This one was ancient, its brown leather shell faded to a ghostly gray, corroded by years of salt water and time. The metal clasps were rusted through, and a strange, musty smell emanated from it, mixing with the ocean air in a way that made Tyler's skin crawl. He hesitated. Something told him not to open it, but curiosity, or maybe duty, won out. With trembling hands, he unzipped the decayed zipper. The world seemed to stop. Inside lay remnants of a life interrupted. Tarnished jewelry that had once gleamed, a crumpled blue floral blouse with faded patterns, an old tortoiseshell comb with strands of hair still clinging to its teeth, a water-damaged diary with pages stuck together, and a photograph. The photograph stopped Tyler cold. A young woman with honey-blonde hair raised a cocktail glass toward the camera, her face lit up with a brilliant smile. She wore a silver moon pendant around her neck. Behind her was a turquoise wooden bar with a hand-painted sign that read, "Tide and Flame, Spring Break 2005. Tyler's hands shook as he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. I think I found something that belongs to a missing person." Within 30 minutes, yellow police tape cordoned off the area. Forensic officers arrived in their white vans, cameras clicked incessantly, and Detective Morgan Kane, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, knelt beside the suitcase, carefully examining each item as if opening a door that had been sealed for nearly 2 decades. Morgan had been with Clearwater PD for 12 years. She'd seen her share of cases, but something about this felt different. As she studied the photograph, a name flickered in the back of her mind, a case from before her time, one of those cold files that haunted the department's archives. Scarlett Hayes. Spring Break 2005, 20 years old, vanished without a trace. Morgan stood slowly, her eyes scanning the endless stretch of beach. The waves continued their eternal rhythm, indifferent to human tragedy. But somewhere beneath that calm surface, the ocean had been holding on to evidence, waiting for the right moment to give it back. "Bag everything," Morgan said to her team, her voice steady but her heart racing. "And pull the Scarlett Hayes file, all of it." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the sand, Morgan couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The suitcase hadn't washed ashore by accident. The ocean was trying to tell them something, and 18 years of silence was about to end. The Part 2, The Mother's Vigil. 3,000 miles away in the small town of Duluth, Minnesota, Diane Hayes poured herself a cup of peppermint tea and settled into the worn armchair by her living room window, the same chair she'd sat in every morning for the past 18 years. The March frost clung to the windows, and bare tree branches scraped against the house in the bitter wind. but Diane barely noticed the cold anymore. Her body had learned to live with it, just as her heart had learned to live with the permanent ache of not knowing. The house at 1419 Maple Street was frozen in time. Scarlett's bedroom remained exactly as she'd left it in March 2005. The walls still decorated with glow-in-the-dark moon stickers, the desk still holding her favorite books, the blue dress she'd planned to wear to her college formal still hanging on the back of the door. Once a week, Diane would open that door, dust the surfaces, water the small potted plant on the windowsill, and sit on the edge of the bed, running her fingers over the faded quilt. She'd close her eyes and try to remember the sound of Scarlett's laugh. That bright, infectious sound that used to fill the house. Some people called it unhealthy. Diane called it survival. Scarlett had been Diane's only child, bright, ambitious, full of life. She'd just been accepted to the University of Minnesota and was preparing to study marine biology. The Florida spring break trip was supposed to be her last hurrah before diving into serious academic work, a week of sun, friends, and freedom with her college orientation group. Diane remembered their last conversation at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. She'd hugged Scarlett tight, maybe a little too tight, and given her the usual warnings. Don't drink too much. Don't go anywhere alone. Call me every day. Scarlett had laughed, her green eyes crinkling at the corners. Mom, I'm 20 years old. I'll be fine. But she wasn't fine. That first night, Scarlett FaceTimed from the hotel, excited, happy, her face sunburned from hours on the beach. Love you, Mom. Talk tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. The next morning, Scarlett's phone went straight to voicemail. Her friends said she'd left the bar around 2 a.m., mentioning she wanted to take a short walk before heading back to the hotel. They'd assumed she needed space, maybe some fresh air after the loud music and crowded dance floor. No one expected it would be the last time anyone saw her alive. In those first desperate months, Diane transformed into someone she didn't recognize. She quit her job as a school librarian, drained her savings, and spent every waking moment either in Florida searching or on the phone with police, private investigators, psychics, anyone who might have answers. She plastered Scarlett's face on every telephone pole, lamppost, and bulletin board in Clearwater. She wore a button on her coat that read, "Have you seen Scarlett?" and appeared on local news stations with a hoarse voice and desperate eyes. She stood on the very beach where Scarlett was last seen and shouted into the waves, "If someone has my daughter, please give her back. If anyone knows anything, please God, don't stay silent." But the ocean kept its secrets, and people slowly stopped listening. Friends drifted away, unsure how to comfort someone trapped in perpetual grief. The police stopped calling with updates. Even well-meaning strangers stopped sending condolence cards. Scarlett's case went cold, filed away with hundreds of other missing persons who'd simply vanished into thin air. Diane's husband, Robert, died of a stroke in 2011. The doctor said it was a blood clot, but Diane knew better. It was a broken heart. Robert had never recovered from losing Scarlett. He'd spent his final years staring at her photograph, whispering the same question over and over. How does someone just disappear? Now, 12 years later, only Diane remained. And Scarlett's room, and the unbearable weight of not knowing. Some nights, Diane dreamed that Scarlett came home. She'd hear a knock at the door, rush to answer it, and there would be her daughter, 20 years old, unchanged, smiling as if she'd never left. Diane would wake gasping, heart pounding, and run to the front door only to find it locked, the porch empty, the street silent under the cold Minnesota stars. On those nights, she'd open Scarlett's closet and press one of her old jackets to her face, desperately searching for any lingering scent in the fabric. Sometimes, she swore she could still smell her daughter's coconut shampoo. Other times, there was nothing but the smell of time, stale and empty. This particular March morning felt different somehow. Diane couldn't explain it. She sat by the window sipping her tea when the doorbell rang, a sound so rare these days that it startled her. When she opened the door, a woman in plain clothes stood on her porch holding a folder. She had kind but serious eyes. "Mrs. Hayes? I'm Detective Morgan Kane from Clearwater Police Department. I know this is unexpected, but something's been found. Something related to Scarlett." The teacup slipped from Diane's hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Hot liquid splashed across her feet, but she didn't feel it. "Found!" The word came out as barely a whisper. Morgan pulled out a photograph, the one from the suitcase. Scarlett raising a cocktail glass, her silver moon pendant catching the light, the turquoise Tide and Flame sign behind her. Spring break 2005. Diane's legs gave out. She collapsed into the nearest chair, her hands covering her mouth as 18 years of held breath finally escaped in a single trembling exhale. "I've never seen this photo," Diane whispered, tears streaming down her face. "This was her last night, the last night anyone saw her." Morgan knelt beside her. The photo was found in a suitcase that washed ashore yesterday morning, along with a diary, personal items, and hair samples. "Mrs. Hayes, we're reopening Scarlett's case, and this time, we're going to find answers." Diane turned to look out the window. The morning fog still hadn't lifted. The world seemed suspended in an endless, breathless moment. For 18 years, she'd lived with a wound that never bled but never healed either, a strange, frozen pain that became as familiar as her own heartbeat. And now, that wound was bleeding again. But this time, Diane wasn't afraid of the pain, because pain meant something was finally happening. Pain meant Scarlett hadn't been forgotten. Pain meant there might finally be truth. Part 3. The last night, March 17th, 2005. The night, everything changed. The Clearwater sky had darkened to deep purple, and the beachfront strip pulsed with neon lights and thumping bass. College students flooded the sidewalks, laughing, shouting, stumbling from bar to bar in various states of intoxication. Spring break was in full swing, and the Tide and Flame was the epicenter of the chaos. The bar's turquoise facade glowed under strings of white lights, and the outdoor patio overlooked the beach where bonfires dotted the sand like fallen stars. Inside, bodies packed the dance floor, and the air was thick with the smell of spilled beer, coconut sunscreen, and youth convinced of its own immortality. Scarlett Hayes arrived with her friends around 9 p.m. She wore a cream-colored sundress that swayed when she walked, her honey-blonde hair half up in a loose bun, light mascara framing her green eyes. She looked happy, or at least, she was trying to look happy. According to Madison Torres, Scarlett's roommate and closest friend on the trip, Scarlett had been acting strange during their 3 days in Clearwater. She wasn't sleeping well, Madison told police in her 2005 statement. She'd wake up in the middle of the night startled, like she'd had a nightmare. And she kept saying she felt like someone was watching her. We thought it was just stress from upcoming exams. We told her to relax, have fun. God, I wish we'd listened. That evening, the group did shots at the bar, took photos, danced under the strobe lights. Scarlett smiled in the pictures, but her eyes told a different story. She seemed distracted, her gaze often drifting toward the bar's entrance or out toward the dark beach beyond the patio. Around 1:45 a.m., Scarlett stepped out onto the bar's smoking balcony, a wooden deck overlooking the ocean, where the music was quieter and the air less suffocating. The security camera captured a grainy image, Scarlett standing alone by the railing, holding a drink, staring out at the black water. What was she thinking in that moment? Was she sensing danger? Or was she just tired, overwhelmed, ready to call it a night? A bartender named Kyle Mendez later reported seeing Scarlett around 1:50 a.m., walking down the wooden steps from the bar toward the beach path. A narrow trail lined with palm trees that led back toward the hotel where her group was staying. She was alone, and that's where the trail went cold. Scarlett's friends, caught up in the music and the crowd, didn't notice she was gone until the bar closed at 2:30 a.m. They returned to the hotel assuming she'd gone back early to sleep. But the next morning, Scarlett's bed was untouched. Her phone was off. Her messages went unanswered. At 10:13 a.m. on March 18, 2005, Clearwater police received the call. 20-year-old woman, 5'5", blonde hair, Fair skin. Last seen wearing a cream sundress and sandals. Missing. The investigation moved quickly at first. Police interviewed everyone at the bar that night. They checked taxi logs, hotel security footage, hospital records. They combed the beach with search dogs and helicopters. Nothing. Scarlett Hayes had simply vanished. But one name kept surfacing during interviews. Ethan Crowley. Ethan was 19 years old, a local who worked part-time at the parking lot adjacent to the Tide and Flame. He had shaggy brown hair, hollow eyes, and a distinctive green ink tattoo of a serpent coiling up his right forearm. Multiple witnesses mentioned seeing Ethan at the bar that night, even though he wasn't working. He'd been standing in the back corner, not drinking, not talking to anyone, just watching. And several people specifically remembered him watching Scarlett. "He stared at her all night," said Crystal Martinez, a waitress at the Tide and Flame. "It was creepy. He didn't even try to hide it. Just stood there with his arms crossed, following her with his eyes wherever she went." Another patron recalled Ethan positioning himself near the bathroom hallway when Scarlett walked past. She didn't seem to notice him, but I did. He was like a shadow, always 3 steps behind her. But the most chilling evidence came from Scarlett's diary, discovered 18 years later in the suitcase. March 14th, 2005. Florida is beautiful. The ocean is just like in the movies. But something feels off, like someone's watching me. March 15th, 2005. I had a nightmare last night. Someone standing below our hotel balcony. When I woke up and looked, no one was there. I'm probably just tired. But this morning at the beach, that guy in the gray shirt was sitting in the exact same spot as yesterday. He has a green tattoo on his arm. March the 16th, 2005. The tattooed guy was at the bar tonight. I saw him standing behind me in the bathroom mirror. When I turned around, he was gone. I didn't tell Madison because I don't want to sound paranoid, but I feel it. He's following me. March 17th, 2005. Last entry. Our last night in Clearwater. I'm relieved to be going home tomorrow, but also sad because this place is so beautiful. If it weren't for the creepy feeling, this would have been perfect. Tonight I'll try that turquoise drink Madison keeps talking about. I'll stay away from the crowd. The music's too loud anyway. If anything happens, tell Mom I've been thinking about her all week, and I know she worries about me. Those were Scarlett's last written words. Police questioned Ethan Crowley on March 20th, 2005. He arrived with a public defender, eerily calm, his brown eyes steady and unblinking. I clocked out at 1:30 a.m., Ethan said. Walked home. Stopped at the 7-Eleven for cigarettes. That's it. When police checked the convenience store's security footage, there he was, time-stamped at 2:04 a.m., clearly visible at the checkout counter buying a pack of Marlboros. The timeline didn't add up for murder. Ethan had left the bar before Scarlett. The store was on the opposite side of town from where she was last seen. There was no DNA evidence, no physical proof linking him to Scarlett's disappearance. The interrogation lasted 6 hours. Ethan never got angry, never seemed nervous. When asked if he knew who Scarlett was, he shrugged. Just another college girl on spring break. There were hundreds of them. Can anyone confirm you went straight home after buying cigarettes? No, I live alone. But I didn't do anything wrong. After 3 days, police had to release him. There simply wasn't enough evidence to hold him. The public was outraged. Local newspapers ran side-by-side photos of Scarlett and Ethan with headlines like, "Missing Girl and the Man Who Watched Her." Parents demanded answers. Students protested outside the police station. But the law required proof, not suspicion. And Ethan had an alibi, grainy, but present. Months later, he quietly left Clearwater and moved to a small town near Savannah, Georgia, where nobody knew about Scarlett Hayes. The case went cold, the file was sealed, and the Tide and Flame eventually closed down, replaced by a high-end seafood restaurant that had no idea it stood on haunted ground. But Scarlett's last night, that cream sundress, that silver moon pendant, that final walk toward the dark beach, remained frozen in time, waiting in the shadows for someone brave enough to drag it back into the light. And 18 years later, a suitcase would do exactly that. Zidamar Part 4. The Suspect. Ethan Crowley was born and raised in Clearwater, the only child of working-class parents. His mother worked double shifts as a supermarket cashier. His father, a retired firefighter, was sidelined by a spinal injury and spent most of his days in a haze of prescription painkillers. Ethan grew up quiet, isolated. He dropped out of high school at 17 and drifted through odd jobs: dishwasher, parking attendant, construction grunt work. He had no close friends, no girlfriend, no ambitions beyond getting through each day. But people who knew him described an unsettling quality, something off beneath the surface. "He had this way of staring," said an elderly neighbor named Ruth Callahan. "Not blinking, just staring. I'd see him on his porch at midnight, standing completely still, looking out at the street like a statue. It gave me chills." When Scarlett Hayes disappeared and Ethan's name surfaced, Ruth wasn't surprised. "I always knew something was wrong with that boy." But suspicion isn't evidence. The 2005 investigation hit every dead end. No body, no weapon, no witnesses after 2 a.m. The bar's rear security camera, which should have captured Scarlett's path toward the beach, malfunctioned between 1:47 a.m. and 2:15 a.m. due to a technical error. Coincidence? Or deliberate sabotage? Detective Morgan Kane, reviewing the case in 2023, flagged that malfunction as suspicious. "Security cameras don't just fail during the exact window when a girl disappears," she noted in her report. "Someone knew which camera to disable and when." Ethan had worked at the parking lot for 8 months. He would have known the layout, the blind spots, the camera angles. After his release in 2005, Ethan vanished from Clearwater. His family's house was sold. His mother moved to Alabama. His father died in 2008. Ethan left no forwarding address, no social media presence, no paper trail. For 14 years, he was a ghost. Until 2019. That year, a brutal assault occurred at a roadside motel in Savannah, Georgia. The victim was a 22-year-old woman with blonde hair who'd been beaten nearly to death. She survived but suffered permanent psychological trauma and memory loss. Ethan was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 30 years in a Georgia state. For over a decade, Diane had quietly tracked every mention of Ethan Crowley online. She kept a folder of newspaper clippings, police reports, and handwritten notes. When she saw his mugshot from the 2019 arrest, her hands trembled. "He's a predator," she wrote in her journal. "And Scarlett was his first victim, the one he got away with." She contacted Clearwater PD, begging them to reopen Scarlett's case in light of Ethan's conviction. But without new evidence, there was nothing they could do. Then came 2023. In March of that year, Morgan Kane received a package at Clearwater Police Department. It was an unmarked envelope from Georgia State Prison containing a single USB drive sealed in an evidence bag. On that drive was a video, 12 minutes long, shot in a concrete prison cell, and sitting in the center of the frame was Ethan Crowley. Morgan pressed play, her heart pounding. Ethan stared directly into the camera, his face gaunt, his eyes hollowed out by years behind bars. He wore an orange jumpsuit with his inmate number printed across the chest, 871904. When he spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless, like someone recounting a dream they'd replayed too many times. "My name is Ethan Crowley. I'm serving 30 years for assault, but that's not why I'm recording this." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I'm here because I need to confess something I've been carrying for 18 years. Something that's been rotting inside me like a disease." Morgan leaned closer to the screen, barely breathing. Scarlett Hayes, the girl from Minnesota, The one who disappeared in 2005. Ethan's voice cracked slightly. I killed her. The room seemed to tilt. I didn't plan it. I got carried away. I'd been watching her for days. She was so beautiful, so alive, and I couldn't stop thinking about her. He rubbed his face with both hands, his fingers trembling. That last night I saw her leave the bar alone. I followed her down the beach path. I just wanted to talk to her, to make her see me. But when I touched her arm, she panicked. She screamed. I covered her mouth. I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted her to be quiet. Ethan's breathing grew ragged. But I held too tight. She fought back, and when she fell, her head hit a rock. There was so much blood, she stopped moving. I thought she was unconscious, but she never woke up. Morgan's hands clenched into fists. I panicked. I dragged her body into the palm bushes and ran home. I sat in my room all night staring at the ceiling, shaking. At dawn, I went back with an old suitcase and a shovel. Ethan looked directly into the camera, his eyes red but tearless. I put her in the suitcase with some of her things. I tried to bury her near the old water tower by the beach, but the sand was too loose. I was terrified someone would find her. So I brought her to my father's house, the one we were renovating. I hid her under the laundry room floor and poured concrete over her. He laughed, a short, broken sound. I worked construction. I knew how to seal everything. And I thought I could forget. Move on. Live my life. His voice dropped to a whisper. But I couldn't. Every night, I heard her voice, screaming, crying, asking why. And then I hurt that woman in Savannah because she had blonde hair. Because for a second I thought she was Scarlett. I thought Scarlett had come back. The video ended abruptly, cutting to black. Morgan sat in stunned silence. Her hands were shaking. After 18 years, Ethan Crowley had confessed. But one question burned in Morgan's mind. Why now? Was this genuine remorse, or one final manipulation, a desperate attempt to control the narrative from behind bars? Either way, the truth was out, and now it was time to dig. Free Part 5. The Search for Truth. The morning after watching Ethan's confession, Morgan Kane stood in the conference room at Clearwater PD, staring at a whiteboard covered in maps, photographs, and timelines. The 2005 case file lay open on the table, hundreds of pages of interviews, dead ends, and unanswered questions. Beside her stood Captain Luis Vargas, a grizzled veteran with 30 years on the force. You really think we'll find her after all this time? Luis asked, his voice heavy with skepticism. Morgan tapped the photo of Ethan's father's house, the one on Cypress Street in the rundown Green Hollow neighborhood. He told us exactly where she is, under the laundry room floor. If he's telling the truth, we'll find her. And if he's lying? Morgan met his eyes. Then we keep digging until we find the truth. By noon, Morgan had secured an emergency search warrant. The property at 71 Cypress Street had been abandoned for years, overgrown with weeds, windows boarded up, a faded "Danger, Do Not Enter" sign hanging crookedly on the front door. The forensics team arrived with ground-penetrating radar, excavation tools, and evidence kits. Morgan stood on the cracked driveway, staring at the house, trying to imagine Scarlett's final moments. Did she know what was happening? Did she fight? Did she call for help? Detective Kane? A young forensic technician named Amy Chen waved her over. We've got something. Inside the laundry room, the radar had detected an anomaly beneath the concrete floor, a hollow space roughly 6 feet long and 2 feet wide. Morgan's pulse quickened. Start drilling. The team carefully drilled core samples through the concrete. On the third attempt, a faint, sour smell wafted up, the unmistakable scent of decomposition even after 18 years. We need to excavate, Amy said quietly. There's definitely something organic down there. It took 6 hours to carefully remove the concrete layer by layer. As the sun began to set, the team finally broke through to the soil beneath. And there, curled in the dirt, partially wrapped in a deteriorated plastic tarp, were human remains. The skeleton was small, delicate. The skull showed a visible fracture on the right side. Near the neck bones lay a tarnished silver necklace, a moon pendant. Morgan closed her eyes, a wave of emotion crashing over her. "Scarlett," she whispered. The remains were carefully excavated and transported to the medical examiner's office. Dr. Helena Graves, the chief forensic pathologist, conducted a full examination. The findings were conclusive. Age: early 20s. Sex: female. Height: approximately 5'5". Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the skull combined with asphyxiation, manual strangulation. Time of death: consistent with March 2005. DNA extracted from the bones matched Scarlett Hayes' medical records perfectly. But the autopsy revealed something Ethan hadn't mentioned in his confession. The skull fracture was severe, Dr. Graves explained, pointing to an X-ray. But it likely wasn't immediately fatal. The victim would have been unconscious but still alive. Morgan's stomach turned. Meaning? Meaning the strangulation came after. He didn't just panic and accidentally kill her. He made a choice. This wasn't manslaughter. It was murder. Morgan spent the next week building the case. She reviewed Ethan's video confession frame by frame, cross-referencing every detail with the physical evidence. She also discovered something crucial in Scarlett's diary, a detail Ethan had mentioned in his confession that was never made public. She had a small scar behind her neck. I noticed when I moved her hair. Scarlett's medical records confirmed it. A 2-centimeter surgical scar from lymph node removal in 2003. Only 3 people knew about that scar: Scarlett, her mother, and her doctor. And now Ethan. That single detail proved beyond doubt that Ethan had been close enough to Scarlett to see something no one else would have noticed. It corroborated his confession in a way that couldn't be fabricated. But Morgan still had questions. Why confess now, after 18 years? Was it guilt, fear, a desire for control? She decided to visit Ethan in person. Part 6. Face to Face. Georgia State Prison was a hulking concrete fortress surrounded by razor wire and guard towers. Morgan Kane sat in the sterile interrogation room, waiting. When the door opened and Ethan Crowley shuffled in wearing shackles and an orange jumpsuit, Morgan felt a chill run down her spine. He looked older than 37, gaunt, hollow-eyed, his skin pale from years without sunlight. But when he sat down across from her, his gaze was steady, almost curious. "You're the detective from Clearwater," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am. You found her." "We did." Ethan nodded slowly, his hands folded on the table. "Good." Morgan studied him, trying to read the man behind the mask. "Why did you confess, Ethan? After all this time, why now?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice soft. "Because I'm tired. Tired of carrying her with me. Every night I see her face. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back on that beach. I hear her screaming. I feel her fighting me." He looked up, and for the first time, Morgan saw something human in his eyes: pain, regret, maybe even remorse. "I thought if I told the truth, maybe she'd stop haunting me. Maybe I could finally sleep." "Do you feel guilty?" Morgan asked. Ethan hesitated. "I don't know. I feel empty. Like I hollowed myself out the night I killed her, and there's nothing left." "You strangled her, Ethan, after she hit her head. You made a conscious choice to end her life." His jaw tightened. "I panicked. Panic doesn't last long enough to strangle someone to death." Silence. Morgan leaned forward. "Scarlett's mother has spent 18 years not knowing. She's kept Scarlett's room exactly the way it was. She's never stopped searching. Do you have any idea what you put her through?" Ethan looked away. I know. Do you? I said I know. His voice cracked, echoing off the concrete walls. He took a shaky breath. I know I destroyed that woman's life. I know Scarlett had a future. I know I'm a monster, but I can't undo it. I can't bring her back. Morgan stood. No, you can't. But you can do one thing. What? Face Diane Hayes in court. Look her in the eye and tell her what you told me. Ethan's face went pale. That's the one thing you owe Scarlett. The truth. All of it. Morgan left without another word, the heavy door clanging shut behind her. Part 8. Ashes and Ocean. 1 month later. The morning sun rose over Clearwater Beach, painting the sand in shades of gold and pink. The waves rolled gently onto the shore, their rhythm eternal and indifferent. Diane Hayes stood at the water's edge, holding a small wooden box. Inside were Scarlett's ashes. After the trial, Scarlett's remains had been cremated per the wishes she'd written in her diary years ago. If anything happens to me, let me stay with the ocean where there's sunlight and waves. Diane wore a simple white dress. Her silver hair lifted softly in the breeze. Morgan Kane stood a few paces behind, giving her space but offering silent support. Diane opened the box and slowly tilted it. Grey-white ash spilled out, carried by the wind and the tide. Some fell into the wet sand. Some floated on the surface of the water before sinking beneath the waves. Diane didn't speak. She didn't pray. She simply stood and watched as her daughter became part of the ocean, part of the light, part of the endless rhythm of the tides. A soft breeze picked up, swirling the remaining ash into the air like a gentle goodbye. When the box was empty, Diane closed her eyes and whispered, I love you, Scarlett. Always. Morgan stepped forward and placed a hand on Diane's shoulder. The older woman turned and, for the first time in 18 years, allowed herself to fully break down. She wept, not in despair, but in release. Because finally, after all this time, Scarlett was home. Epilogue: When the Ocean Refuses to Keep Secrets. 3 months after Scarlett's ashes were scattered, Morgan Kane received a letter. It arrived at the police station in a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. Detective Kane. I don't know where to start, but after hearing about Scarlett's case, I realized I need to speak up. In 2005, I was a waitress at the Tide and Flame. One night, a guy with a tattooed arm asked me to go for a walk after my shift. I said no. He didn't push it. But I remember his eyes, the way he looked at me, like I was something he wanted to own. I didn't report it because nothing happened. But now I know. I could have been Scarlett. If you're willing to listen, I want to tell my story, because Scarlett deserves for people to know the truth. And maybe I can help make sure no one else ends up like her. Crystal Martinez. Morgan stared at the letter for a long time. Then she picked up her phone. Because the story wasn't over. Not really. Scarlett Hayes had been found. Justice had been served. But there were others. Women who'd felt that same creeping fear. Who'd been watched, followed, hunted. And Morgan knew that for every Scarlett whose story ended in tragedy, there were countless others still waiting to be heard. She thought about Diane, who'd never given up. She thought about Scarlett, who'd left clues in her diary even as danger closed in. And she thought about the ocean, the way it had held onto that suitcase for 18 years, waiting for the right moment to give it back. Some secrets can't stay buried. Some truths refuse to be silenced, and some women, even in death, refuse to be forgotten. Morgan opened her laptop and began typing a new case file. Because justice doesn't end with a verdict, it begins with listening. And Scarlett Hayes, from wherever she was now, had made sure the world would finally hear her voice. The end. If you believe every victim deserves to be heard and every truth deserves to be uncovered, subscribe to this channel. Because there are more stories out there. Stories of women who were silenced, forgotten, or erased. And we're going to tell every single one. Thank you for listening to Scarlett's story. Justice may be slow, but it never stops coming. See you in the next case.